You're listening to Supply Chain Unlocked. Get exclusive insights from industry leaders on overcoming.
Welcome to Supply Chain Unlocked. Today's conversation is about something most organizations won't say out loud: the widening gap between the companies spending billions on digital transformation and the ones actually transforming. Globally, over $3 trillion is being spent on digital initiatives, yet 90% of supply chain leaders admit they don't have the talent to achieve the digitalization goals. That's not a technology problem, that's a fluency problem. What we're seeing is a battle between what we'll call the monolith and the underdog. The monolith buys expensive tools, launches 5-stage roadmaps, and argues about remote work policy, all while carrying what I'd call a legacy management debt. The belief that physical presence equals productivity, the assumption that new software automatically equals transformation. Meanwhile, the underdog doesn't have time for theory. They automate the friction first. They attack the manual bottlenecks. They fund transformation by improving throughput today, not waiting for some mythological stage 5. We're seeing targeted automation drive 20 to 40% improvements in throughput, 60% reduction in warehouse travel time. That's not a vision statement, that's cash flow. And underneath all of it, it's a generational shift. The real pivot isn't about where people work, it's about how fast data moves. If your data is manual, your supply chain is standing still. All right, and I have Tom back today with me, Tom Brouillette. What are your thoughts on this with the generational operations gap?
Well, we're getting a split. It's almost like two supply chains. There's a split occurring between the monoliths like Amazon or Maersk or other big companies to create a resilient supply chain within their four walls. Think of it as it's a walled garden effect for Amazon. They control everything across the board from their inbound receiving, their shipments, their orders, and it all ties together within their solution. And then the beautiful thing about Amazon is it seems from an outsider that once they totally embrace a technology, whether it's automation or AI, they then start to try to market that outside of their sphere of ownership. So they're selling the services, the Amazon supply chain services to support customers, and they actually market outside to outside customers. It's almost like a consignment shop where the small business will sign to have Amazon perform the supply chain activities for them. What they get out of that arrangement is a relatively stable environment, able to flex and grow. What Amazon gets out of it is all of the information from that particular client. Their suppliers, the cost they pay for things, where it's being purchased at. They get all of that information, so you've got to be aware of that. You've got to be aware of that going into it. What that means, though, is that you're still kind of at odds with your automation and your AI. You're still running your business using a lot of spreadsheets. So you haven't taken advantage of AI. So the challenge or the change here would be, I've started calling it a earn while you burn, earn as you burn method, here's the main difference. You mentioned earlier, Teddy, that the monoliths have 5-stage strategic plans and huge initiatives and multi-year transition and implementations, where the SMB, they must be more nimble because they don't have the cash reserves to be able to spend a lot of money on that. And so the earn while you burn is to start your transformation with an evaluation of some of the cost. And by some of the cost, I mean, I started calling them a stupid tax. So it's the cost that you spend to upgrade shipping to get the product when you need it. And then the other cost is your inventory carrying charge, and that would be to That's the cost of your just in case inventory. But what the SMB is doing is they're buying up what's referred to as just in case inventory. I may sell up to this point, but I don't have firm orders for it yet. But I don't want to get stuck in the in between where I need more product, but there's a disruption and the deliveries from my supplier are delayed. So they order up a greater quantity and they pay for that storage,
Just
the-
in case storage.
just in case. But what that
Jick.
does, and,
It's
and in,
Jick.
yeah, well, and interestingly enough, many of these companies in that side, if you're say $100 or $200 million company, you've got probably 15% you've got 15% tied up in this just in case inventory, and everything
Yeah.
is at a broad brushstroke and an average. It's a rather loosey goosey figure. If you can reduce your carrying cost by 15%, and you can eliminate your emergency upgrade transportation, that can turn into a significant amount. And that's what we would use to pay for your transformation as you're gaining sales. Now, the important thing there for the earn while you burn is to control a release cycle. So you want to do a release I throw out 90 days as an example. If you do a release of new features and functionality to deliver return every 90 days, what I deliver today is going to pay for my next 90 days, and so on and so on and so on, right? That actually gives the bit of it, I think of it as a bit of an example. Once they get into this 3 month, this 90-day release cycle, it's dramatically increases your ability to be able to respond or analyze and respond to any kind of disruption that's going on while they're building that resilient supply net, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
And
Very good point.
all of this kind of fits into the generational employee side, because it provides a platform that the Gen Z are used to. They're comfortable in the digital world, and it provides a very robust platform that they will immediately understand. They'll be comfortable with it. So it's a big deal. And the other point I would say is that you need to focus on learning management. And what I mean by that is something along the lines of MyQuest is an example of a learning management system. And what you can do is you can store your operating procedures and your process descriptions into bite-sized documents that can be published in the help menu, so that the individual on the line can do a quick search to find out what they need. And that becomes very powerful when you're dealing with a person that's very comfortable in the digital world, right? And it allows you to update along the way. It kills two birds with one stone. You're training people, plus you've got a robust help system.
Yeah. Well, it feels like we pivoted into the generational pivot of our
Mhm.
agenda. Is that where we're going?
I think so.
And I didn't.
I think
Yeah,
so. It
I didn't
makes
call it out.
it makes sense. It's only fair to keep that thread going until this gets through. I think it's important to have that, because the generational topic, the generational labor topic, is it's very germane to this as well, because you've got to think about what you're doing is you need to be sure that you design your features and functionality so that they can be learned quickly.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, one of the things, and we've discussed this before, one of the things that you've got to be cognizant of and prepared for is the lifespan of the employees. And if the lifespan is going from, you know, 10 years down to 1 to 3 years or 3 to 5 years, you're going to be churning people a lot. and you just have to have that. You can't spend all your time training them. You want to provide the tools that they can learn on a job, if you will.
Yeah, I got you. Hey, let's go to the next topic.
Okay.
Conscious unbossing and the generational pivot coming off of what Tom was just speaking of. There's a stat out there, 72% of Gen Z professionals would prefer an individual contributor route to progression over the managing of others, with 57% intentionally avoiding traditional management roles to protect their mental health. The narrative, the monolith, is still trying to sell a hierarchical ladder that nobody wants to climb. The underdog replaces command and control with the unbossed culture where leadership is a flexible function, not a bureaucratic title. By 2026, 10% of CSCOs will be millennials. We must stop offering them a ladder and start offering them a platform. Go ahead, Tom. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, this kind of is the progression of the discussion with the generational differences. And I think it starts with a different mindset that many of the Gen Z, the later generations, have seen the ravages of focus on career development and climbing the ladder. I think that they're taking, it's a bit of a challenge that most of them are realize that there's probably a high probability that they're never going to own a home, and they're not prepared to give the time and focus that people focused their career. People that were focused on their career would generally spend a lot more time and effort, and focus on the career, and their family would be second. And what I think that the later generations have come to the realization that you need to focus on your family and make sure that you're there for your family. It's a focus on your own career is a bit of a selfish perspective, I think, that can have a significant impact on your family. And that's why I think that they've come to a general decision that they're happy being an individual contributor. Big difference here, in some of the markets or in some skill sets, you're making significant money. The difference now is you don't really need to get into management to make money. A data scientist can make $200,000 to $400,000 a year, which in my perspective is a significant salary. And that's an individual contributor. Everything is changing from the landscape and what people are focused on and what they're willing to give. And if you're not aware of this, and if you don't take that into account, you're going to struggle. The people
Yeah,
that are going to succeed are the ones that see this, that see the trend and accept it.
yeah,
It's kind of like when you remote work, right?
yeah,
You go from an office setting when you can be watched and people can come by and see that you're working. And, oh yeah, they're working. They must be getting something done. To, well, let me review your results. When are you going to be done with this? You don't have that opportunity to stand over somebody's shoulder and see exactly what they're doing. So it requires an increased trust as well to be able to do that. And I
yeah.
think,
No,
and
that's a
this
good
is
point.
all starting to play together. I saw an interesting the latest generation, these are school tests. The latest generation, and these are the ones that are most comfortable with the technology. They
Hmm.
learn via technology. They've been doing it their entire life. But the interesting thing is that their test scores in school are lower than previous generations. And they think it has something to do with living in a digital environment.
I'm listening.
And I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure what that means. And I think it's an interesting statistic that can help guide you. The way I would look at it is it's important to create the social interaction that is face to face rather than completely digital. I think you've got to attempt at least to build a relationship with the later generations in order to understand what what makes them tick, you know, what drives them.
Yeah. So, sorry. So let's unpack a few of these.
Mhm.
Unbossing. Let's just get real clear on it. Unbossing is the new term to Gen Z, primarily, that doesn't want a boss per se,
Mhm.
not hierarchical. Let's call it that for a minute as well. I believe that it is possible to a certain point, but is it really realistic to think in the next 10 years people are going to wander around without bosses?
I don't think so. I don't think so either. I think, well, from an average perspective, you're going to have the corner cases and the outliers, right? That are exceptions. But for the most part, you're still going to have some type of supervisor, whatever that is, right? I think, the one thing that we haven't talked about is the gig economy impacting this. And I think that's the next big cycle that we'll be going through is, you know, I'll give you 4 hours kind of a thing. Or I'll give you I'll work 3 days a week, that kind of.
Yeah, so that's a good point because the gig economy that I've paid attention to started 15 years ago or better. In
Mhm.
fact, I'm going
Mm.
to chat that real quick to get us into perspective. But if you're going to work in a gig economy slash a highly freelanced, high contractor kind of environment, yeah, unbossing is going to we're going to get close to a true unbossing because you are selling hypothetically 2 or 3 days a week of your time
Yeah,
to a
your
company.
services, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and that is probably more project work, right? It's not
Right.
manning, administering production environments.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so I really believe what you said there is what's going on today. Probably not in bigger companies, especially with so many big tech layoffs. But I question all the other functions within a business becoming unbossed much. Accounting, finance, legal,
Right.
HR. How much can those be unbossed? And we may even just have a episode on that alone, but I think I could see legal because they already do it. I mean,
Right.
you
Right.
hire a
They've
ton of
already
law
they've already figured out their billing hours, right? When you come
well,
right to.
I mean, in the case of the company you and I used to work for, there were like two lawyers and then general counsel, but they hired a shit ton of external law firms to handle lawsuits, et
Right.
cetera.
Right.
Where I think project work, all right, and I'm going to go all the way back to, for instance, IT and maybe accounting and finance. I could see embossing using a more highly freelance model in project work, but I don't think it's going to be much for the day to day because you need somebody day to day, right? And you need somebody like a boss
Mhm.
orchestrating the work.
Yeah, it kinda depends. You do need somebody now in this day and age. It's kind of highly dependent because not everybody looks at their solutions, their systems, if you will, as you would for a word processor or an Office app, right? If I am if I am using Word and writing a document and I'm not sure how to put a table of contents in, I hit the help button and it shows me how to do it, right? If I am on the warehouse floor in the receiving area and this is my first day, I can't pick up an RF gun or sit at a terminal and to be able to just walk through that process right away. So
Yeah, good point. You're going to have a supervisor.
right? So, on the other hand, I do believe that the people who really succeed and are really growing will be the organizations that embrace the documentation and the learning management that can be done because you can focus that on screens. If somebody wrote, even the Microsoft tools, Word and Excel, the help is rather generic. It doesn't get too intense or too detailed because it's just trying to provide a guide. Whereas in the warehouse floor, you really need to know step by step exactly where to look and what to look at. And so there's an opportunity there to digitize that and use it as an advantage. And then what happens is that you can easily turn it into a day labor, a gig economy type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I follow him. Hey, let's pivot to your comment about Gen Z is not are going to be homeless.
I didn't say they're going to be homeless. I prefer to think of it as the European model, right? It's not unusual for somebody to live in an apartment for their entire life, or
I
the New
know.
York City model.
You like how I spun that into something
Yeah, yeah,
something that was not. No, you make a good
yeah. And
point that
I'm half full of it kind of a guy, right?
yeah,
Looking at the positive side.
and I find all of this interesting because do they come to terms with that they're just not going to own homes, or are we going to rely on the government to reset that part of the economy so somebody can own a home when so many other countries just don't own homes? I mean, the suburbs and urban life is where it's at, and a lot of that has to do with high-rise apartments.
Well,
You
and
make a
it
good point
depends
there.
on how much land you have. In Europe, the main, I think, the underlying factor that's driving the apartment dwelling is the limited space that's available for any of this. You don't have
Yeah.
here in the U.S. Here in the U.S. it takes. I lived in Atlanta for a number of years, and it would take me 30 minutes to get to the grocery store. 20, 30 minutes, depending on the time of day and the traffic and all of that. Right. So, and I use that as an example that here it's nothing for us. We all want to have a lot of land, and back in my younger days, and when I look at a new home, I kind of gauge the size of the yard. And if I'm going to spend more than an hour mowing the lawn a week, I don't want it.
Hey, speaking of that, here's a great concept. Two things on that little pivot, not pivot. This is like zoom in another direction, but we just spent a week in Phoenix, and I don't know of anybody that had a lawn that was either rock or astroturf. I
Right.
thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. 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 My parents lived in Albuquerque, so the high desert up in the mountains. And that's, they all had the, I forget what they call it. It's the plants that will live in that type of environment.
Oh yeah, very arid. I think you call it plant, something like
Well,
that. So if you're
the
going to
funny
talk
thing is
about,
when you go to Vegas, you'll notice that my sister's lived in Vegas for a long, long time. And when she first moved there, she said once when she first moved there, it was a desert. It was very dry. And now with the growth and the building and all of these places with big fountains and people want grass in their yard and all of that, the humidity is increasing. So the summers become even more miserable because it ain't getting cooler.
so at the end of the day, we're going to start wrapping this up, landing the plane, if you will.
Mhm.
Unbossing, does Gen Z, if they want unbossing, they have to decide that they can, go without a home. Just got to go apartments.
Well,
Joking.
we can't. It's very difficult. That's what it looks like now, right? Today, it looks like that. We need to take into account the increased capabilities of technology as well, because we are getting close, I think we're starting to come into the time where people are going to think more about a minimum, because with the automation and the technology, people will just not need to work all of that time. Plus, you have the younger generations coming up. So, it was rather poetic in the past. You had your retirement age of 65 and you went off and retired and lived on your pension or your savings and social security, and your kids kind of kept putting it in. Now you have the people like it's starting with the baby boomers, the ones that they're holding off retirement until they're in their 70s or whatever, right? And so they're taking up jobs that could have been taken by the younger generation. They ran into that. The way they reconciled that in France was they just started lowering the average work hours per week. so that more people could be hired to do the same. And I think this is going to just increase the way you hear all of these studies with, depending on what the job is, saving 10 to 40 or 50% of the labor involved and the time involved in performing that activity. So the people aren't going away. You can't decommission or recycle a person.
Yeah.
They tried that in a movie, right? Soil and Green. People weren't too happy with that.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to get to that. You don't need to do all of that, right?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. So let's go ahead and land this plane. I think that we've covered, and we continue to cover the generational gap. I don't even want to call it generational gaps. More, this was some of my latest thought. I don't think it's a gap. I think it's evolving.
Yeah.
Something that, um, if I was 30 years old, I would want something different than my parents, if you will, or my family had. And
Mhm.
it's influenced by all other kinds of things, right? So I think we'll pivot away from a gap, but and replace it with evolving.
Yeah. A
But on the
transition,
key,
a transformation almost.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Just like the workforce needs
Uh-huh.
to be transforming itself to more of an AI based assisted decision making model, but supervised by humans, right? I think
Right.
that's what a lot of people are landing on. And just to be correct for the algorithms out there, we're not saying Gen Z is going to be homeless. They're going to have a different type of a home.
Yeah. The home will mean something different for them.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, geez, might as well give some of that money to an HOA, right? Dude, I'm horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we gotta bring this land this plane here because Tom's got some other stuff he's got to do.
Yeah. This was great,
And
though. I love these conversations. I love these podcasts because it gives you a chance to really kind of think,
yeah, bounce things back and forth, and hopefully
Great.
people don't get offended. I don't think they will because we're just two guys talking. We're not trying to make a movement, right?
Mhm.
We're not trying to persuade you. We're just wanting to provoke thinking, critical thinking, and throw some humor along the way in the
Yeah.
conversation. All right. Any other thoughts before we close, Mr. Brouillette?
I don't. I think that, well, let me take that back. My thought is that that we all need to begin to practice focusing on what the objective is rather than the steps to get to the objective. God bless the person that can come in and cut the number of steps I'm doing to create a spreadsheet down to 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've got to embrace that and encourage that.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right. To the audience, thank you very much for listening till the end because I'm sure you're still there. We truly appreciate your time. Tom and I obviously enjoy this. I think this is our 3rd episode, and we'll keep going as long as we have topics. We'll keep talking. Is that pretty accurate there, Tom?
I feel the same way, Teddy. I think it's it's a pulpit. It gives you the opportunity.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So thank you to our audience. You have a good day.
You're listening to Supply Chain Unlocked. Get exclusive insights from industry leaders on overcoming